You're listening to Tatiana is Everyone, an Orphan Black podcast. I'm your host, Kris.
And I'm Annie,
who is filling in for Stephanie for this episode.
Totally filling in. I am totally pretend Stephanie today.
So in this episode, we are talking about episode 404 of Orphan Black, From Instinct to Rational Control. So, spoiler warning, if you haven't seen that episode, stop this episode right now. We are going to be talking about everything and anything that happens in that episode, but nothing after this episode. So let's go ahead and jump in, I guess, because a lot of stuff happened this episode.
Yeah.
And some of it was very unnerving or terrifying, and some of it was hilarious.
Yeah. Perfect mix.
But let's start off talking about primarily Sarah, but there's also some MK and Dizzy and Ferdinand mixed in there.
There's a lot of stuff.
There is. There's often a lot of stuff in Sarah's storyline.
Yeah, well, I always say how I describe Orphan Black. It's one of the most well-written but dense storylines I've ever seen in any series, but it's very worth it, so.
I agree, yeah, on all that. But yeah, the episode starts off, we get Ferdinand, who gets brought into a safe house, and immediately starts making
frittata.
A frittata?
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. I don't know if I've seen a guy like this who's like a killer and an assassin, and yet he's so charming. I don't know if that's like, I'm just a regular guy. I'm like, no, you're not.
But he's not a regular guy, because he's dressed super fancy. He's like a classy guy.
Yeah, he's a classy killer kind of guy. Yeah.
Dressed super fancy and making frittatas. But yeah, he has this message from Rachel on a flash drive, and he sends Sarah to Sarah's source, who she won't give up, but of course is MK, to trace that message so they can, find out where Rachel is. Which, of course, just starts the rest of the events of the episode.
And it all kind of goes on this crazy path. Roller coaster, downhill, twisty turny ride. First off,
as happens with this show.
Yeah, but there's this kind of tug of war and give and take with Sarah and Dizzy, because he
AKA
says,
beardy guy.
Yeah, beardy guy, who he says, well, I'm not going to help you unless you tell me what's going on. And I'm like, bad idea, Sarah. But I think I'm a little unnerved almost by Sarah, because she's so desperate to get this bot out of her face that she's kind of, she's disregarding Felix, tells him to piss off last episode, even though he's in the middle of his own thing, which is very valid to him. And now she's telling people who aren't in Clone Club about clones and the whole story. And I'm like, Sarah, who says you can trust this guy? I'm like, I don't think so. So I don't know what your take is on that, Kris.
I have mixed feelings about it, because it's one of those things I feel like, from Dizzy's perspective, it totally makes sense. Why should he cooperate with her? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sarah is being awfully demanding, as Sarah does.
Yeah.
Sarah, of course, we know she has valid reasons for it, but
yeah. But
it's not like anybody else really. I mean, he has no context for any of this, and I can't blame him for being suspicious, because she's acting weird. She objectively is acting really weird.
But even for her, she's being excessively demanding.
But I'm saying he doesn't know her.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So he has no context. He has no baseline. And she is. I mean, we see her be really short with Allison, with the whole pull your weight for once or whatever it is comment, which not cool, Sarah.
That did not make me happy.
I mean, I get where you're coming from, but it's uncalled for.
Yeah, it's like, Sarah, you can't treat the people that you love when you're also trying to hide out from Neolutianists. You can't isolate them, even though you're under an incredible amount of stress and you've got this thing in you. But if she keeps treating people that way, it's going to be more difficult for her to find,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be more difficult for her to find Susan Duncan, so.
Yeah, I'm a little torn, because I feel bad for Sarah. I do, and I get where all this is coming from, but at the same time, it's just, this ultimately is not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Treating everybody like this. I get where it's coming from, but still not cool. Not cool, Sarah.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, but back to Dizzy, like, I understand why she tells him.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm never certain if it's a good idea. But
yeah.
Also, it's like, well, you know, it's, I don't know.
But I can kind of see from his perspective, from what we've seen, he's already had these, you know, shady encounters with MK because she's always trying to be off the grid. And, you know, he had this video in the first place. Where did he get it? I can see how he'd be inclined to believe her story, too.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things as suspicious as I am of him, just because, you know, by virtue of his being a character on this show.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's Orphan Black, yeah.
But I don't think he's done anything so far to make me specifically not trust him.
Yeah.
He seems like he's
not going to fully trust him at the same time.
No, but
yeah.
At the same time, I don't automatically assume he's a bad guy. Because I think the things we've seen him do have been helpful and supportive.
Like telling Sarah not to get killed by stepping on a pressure plate. So,
right. And he loans Sarah his car, and as he's doing it, he's kind of like, I must be crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he might not be a good guy, but I'm not assuming that he's a bad guy.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And I think what was also unnerving for me in this episode was what Dizzy said about MK, which proves to be true. Like, she's dangerous if you push her too far or if she gets cornered. Something to that effect. Yeah, in the right situation. Because in the beginning of the episode... Which is
exactly what happens in this episode.
Yeah, because in the beginning of the episode, we see MK and she's hacking and doing her thing, and I'm like, okay. And then you see she's got C4, and I'm like, oh crap. What the... You know... And it was fascinating because she was looking up all the dyad files. And I never do this, but I was watching the episode for the first time, and I'm all, what's she looking at? So I freeze-framed it, and I was reading all of the dyad personnel files she was looking up. It's fascinating, all the work that the production department puts into all of this, because it said, you know, Scott, entry-level employee, blah, 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 has been, you know, employee status terminated. Cosima Neos, it's... You know, her status is, like, secret something, you know, and I read the same thing for Delphine. It was very interesting. So, anyway, but yeah, that was fascinating.
Interesting.
And looking at the chart she made and, yeah, that MK was making, which I didn't realize until the end, that she was looking for Ferdinand and how she was connected to Helsinki. That was great, so...
Yeah, they did show at the beginning there when she was making that chart that it said topside, and then it was, I think, board of directors at the top.
I had to look at that again.
Yeah, so. I didn't recognize any of the names other than Marion Bowles.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
Or at least not that I remember.
Yeah, I was like, did you recognize any of those names? Because I didn't.
There was the one name on there which seemed familiar, but I don't know if it's anything. I'll have to go back and look. Okay. But then underneath that was Ferdinand Chevalier.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we, the audience, are like, aha! But yeah. So, of course, that also was interesting that Ferdinand was essentially looking for her, even though he didn't know who she was.
Yeah.
Just knew her as Sarah's source, so...
But that was the whole purpose of MK's endgame? That was just to draw out Ferdinand by warning Sarah?
I don't think so.
Or does MK really care for Sarah and her clone sisters? I don't know.
I don't know that we ever knew that MK does necessarily care about Sarah and her sisters. Like, we know that she cared about Beth.
Yeah.
And I think, therefore, there's some responsibility on her part, since Beth... Like, the last thing Beth said to her was to watch over the others.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like MK maybe feels like she has a duty toward them, but, I mean, she doesn't know them.
Yeah.
Because we saw that she was close to Nikki.
Yeah.
And we know that Ferdinand killed Nikki.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least, it was strongly implied. I don't think taking out Ferdinand was her endgame, but I do feel like it was an item on her to-do list.
Okay. It's interesting because when you mentioned Beth, we still don't know what happened the night Beth killed herself. and she came back with blood on her hands and everything.
Right. I mean, the couple of people I suggested as possibilities for people who had died have both proven to be alive since then, so
Yeah.
I just don't know anymore.
But does MK know what killed Beth? But yeah, trying to figure out MK's whole plan, because she still leaves Sarah after she steals Ferdinand's $3.7 million, so it's not like she's planning to stick around with the sisters and get her own clone phone, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's a gutsy move. Also, we finally know what corncob is, so there you go.
Yeah.
Which is something that Rachel says in season 3, at the beginning of season 3.
Oh, okay.
One of the first things that she utters when somebody's questioning her about something after she wakes up from post-surgery.
Okay.
She says corncob.
I was totally laughing at the GIF on the Orphan Black Twitter account where they had the tonight on Orphan Black, and they had the Rachel Pop Funko figure getting knocked over by a bunch of corn cobs. It was hilarious.
Yeah, it was like mini corn, or baby corn.
Mini corn, yeah.
And yeah, that's what it was. It was because I saw that too, and I didn't catch it on the first watch, but upon rewatch, it's like, oh, that's what Ferdinand said his password was, corncob, 2 words. I was like, oh, that's why they had that on their page.
So, sorry, again, referring to an in-joke we have in relation to Killjoys. I am a level 1 Orphan Black fan, but question for you. So is Ferdinand in love with Rachel, and when did that happen?
Yes, he is, and we don't know when it happened.
Okay.
But remember, last season, Sarah was pretending to be Rachel, and
yeah.
They had their encounter, let's say.
They had their ways, yeah.
But Ferdinand was super into it, and so, yeah, it's not surprising that
Which is
it's
weird.
an actual thing.
Yeah, because I kept trying to deduce in this episode, wow, Ferdinand, he really, that's his motivation is Rachel, huh? He really wants to find her.
Right, well, by the end of season 3, because at the beginning of season 3, like, we knew that they'd had romantic encounters.
Yeah.
Or at least sexual encounters.
Mm-hmm.
But then by the end of season 3, when he finds out that Neolutionists took Rachel, that's when he gets furious. And then it's like, oh, I think it wasn't just a sexual encounter. He actually has feelings for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did like that whole show and tell that MK did in Beth's apartment with the Rachel up on the screen and everything.
Yes, a projector presentation is very helpful.
Yes.
For a television medium, you know.
Mm-hmm.
For the audience, I mean.
Yes, MK really does know her PowerPoint skills. But yeah, playing with candles and pouring gasoline, pretty disturbing. But then
it is.
When she, pulled her hair back and showed her scar, I went, oh, because, I still have not read the Helsinki comics.
I haven't either.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my god. And how many clones got killed in the Helsinki incident? Do we know?
We do know. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Uh-huh.
And I don't remember them. But she mentioned how many casualties there were.
Because Sarah said there's 22 clones that we know of, and 9 are still alive.
I don't remember.
Was that right? And I'm like, Sarah, don't give him the whole story. Now you're giving him numbers? So again, I was like, God, Sarah, just tell him, Dizzy, the whole history of Clone Club. But
that does seem risky, doesn't it?
Well, again, that just shows how desperate she is. I think more than I've ever seen her personally. That's just in my opinion.
I disagree in the sense that there was the thing where Rudy had Kira.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Or when Daniel had Kira. Like,
yeah.
I think those are
pretty desperate. Yeah.
Top-level desperation.
That's true. Never mind.
But, I mean, she is desperate.
Yeah.
Barring Kira in danger, I do feel like, yeah, she's pretty desperate. And of course, I mean, from what we find out from Cosima and Scott in this episode, she has reason to be, I think, concerned at the very least, because we find out that the maggot bots are actually doing some sort of gene editing, some sort of gene therapy.
So they might be changing her DNA?
Yes.
Into what?
I don't know. That's the big question now.
Yeah, because that wasn't really answered, was it?
Nope, but there are 6 episodes left this season.
Oh, God.
I can't believe the season's moving so fast. It feels like it's moving really fast to me.
It's really fast and it's really, really tight. I mean, it's written so tightly as it always is, but it's really intriguing this year. Particularly, that's what I'm finding.
Me too.
So,
I'm really enjoying this season.
Yeah, me too. So, I love... Speaking of Cosima and Scott, I loved how they said, "Oh, that's so Allison. The bag was fashionable and functional."
Yes. That was pretty great.
Except, I'm just picturing Allison and Donnie decapitating the head with some garden, like, weed whacker or something. And poor Donnie,
I don't know that it would have been that difficult, though.
I don't know, but I bet Donnie lost his cookies again. Or tossed his cookies again. I would have.
I would not be surprised if Allison just dismissed him from the premises.
Yeah.
So, let me handle this.
Yeah. Anyway. But, yeah, that was funny watching the behind-the-scenes bits where Tatiana was like, as soon as they said cut, I just screamed because the whole gooey head they found quite gross.
I don't blame her.
Yeah.
It was...
Yeah.
It was pretty
quite
nasty.
Gross. Yes.
And the little, like, tumor thing around the maggot bot, I mean...
Yeah. Ew.
There was none of that. That was not gross.
Yeah. Ew.
But yeah. Okay, so going back, though, to Sarah and MK, because there are a couple things I want to talk about first, before we go on to all the other stuff, because there's an exchange between Sarah and MK, which is, I think, super interesting, super relevant, where Sarah says, "I know about Helsinki. Did you tell her what happened to you?" And MK says, "No, she was too fragile." And then Sarah responds, "I'm not, all right? I'm not going to back down."
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting.
Well, again, that makes me think of Beth's state of mind and what happened to her. I'm just dying to know what happened the night she killed herself and why she was so fragile.
Well, but I mean, it's so much before, or so much that leads into Beth committing suicide. Because,
that's true.
I mean, all of the flashbacks that we saw, I mean, she was already spiraling, I think. I mean, with the snorting drugs.
And...
Because we knew she was taking drugs, but...
That many drugs? Yeah.
That many, and the fact that she was actually snorting them, I mean, it's real in a way that it wasn't before, to me.
Exactly. Because now...
Not that it wasn't real before, but I think there's, like, a new understanding of how serious it was. Because there's something about the fact that she was snorting them, to me, right? Like, that's like some next level drug usage.
Yeah. Well, and now, again, we've seen it. It's not just telling about it. It's,
right.
We've actually seen it on the screen, and the case she was in, and then the whole, Maggie Chien case, and trying to figure out, I mean, did she know that Paul was her monitor and all this stuff, so...
She suspected, if she didn't actually know.
Yeah, so...
But yeah, that's what I mean, though, like, spiraling thing, because...
It's a lot of stuff contributing to that spiral.
The drug usage then, which was probably, again, we're assuming, because we don't actually know what prompted the drug usage, but it seems like it was either caused by, or perhaps made worse by, the clone situation. And the responsibilities of that, I think. And then knowing that Paul was involved, and just how deep the conspiracy goes, or at least as deep as she found out it went. But then, of course, the drug usage then led to her killing Maggie Chen accidentally, and then that making things worse. And then, I mean, we don't even know what happened that night, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me to hear MK talk about it and how she was too fragile, which is kind of interesting because from what we've seen of MK, I don't know that I wouldn't use the word fragile, but she's clearly, I don't know, an introvert.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, she seems to shy away from
conflict.
Well, I mean, just like direct confrontation with people. Like she's
from human contact. And I think, living off the grid like she is and being so paranoid, I think was really having an effect on her. So she doesn't interact. It affects her interactions with people.
Well, I mean, given what's happened to her, I can't blame her.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, I don't know. It was interesting to me that she had that exchange with Sarah. And I feel like it's interesting because I think Sarah's right, I mean, from what we've seen, Sarah's handling things surprisingly well.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense to me because Sarah's life has always been chaos. You know what I mean? From what we've heard anyway.
Yeah.
So perhaps Sarah is uniquely suited to deal with everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I like this, I'm not all right. I'm not going to back down because she won't.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that Sarah won't back down.
Yeah, that's very Sarah.
It is. But also, I mean, she was raised by Mrs. S, who we see defuse a bomb.
Like it's nothing. Yeah.
And like, Ferdinand is so freaked out, but Mrs. S is just kind of like, eh.
Yeah. And they just leave. And then he gets up.
Mrs. S is wonderful.
I know.
I'd actually speculated before the season started, because there were the promos and they were showing the C4 and somebody building a bomb with it. And I'm like, is that Mrs. S? For some reason I'm thinking about Mrs. S. Because Mrs. S had that line about bombs in one of the previous seasons. And
oh, funny.
So again, like, I was not remotely surprised when they called her in to disarm that thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because as soon as they were there and he was in trouble, I'm like, somebody call Mrs. S. She'll know what to do. And then they did. And then I'm like, I get to gloat.
Well, what cracks me up is, it's so weird how Sarah, they have to be forced to work with Ferdinand. And now we're like calling Mrs. S to help out Ferdinand, of all people.
Well, but it makes sense to me because Ferdinand clearly is like a guy on the inside.
Yeah.
He's proven himself to be useful, if nothing else, if not trustworthy. He's proven himself useful. So I think the fact that at the end of season 3, he's like taking care of the guy who was his right-hand man upon discovering the Neolution ties.
True.
And basically says, take Kendall somewhere, no need to tell me where. I think the fact that he's like, don't tell me where you're taking her. If anything was going to get him some amount of trust, it was that.
Yeah.
In my mind. So since we're talking about Ferdinand and Neolution, let's talk about Rachel. Because we didn't get too many scenes with her, but the stuff that we saw was really interesting to me. Because Rachel and Susan Duncan have these conversations, and basically Susan Duncan tells her Rachel needs to make a decision about Charlotte's care, or rather Charlotte's lack of care.
Yeah.
Because they have this conversation about how, if they let the disease progress, it would be a useful bit of data.
But why does Rachel get to make that decision as opposed to Susan?
Well, here's my question. Would Rachel actually get to make that decision? Like, is it actually Rachel's decision, or is Susan, as Rachel was wondering, like, is Susan testing her?
Exactly. Yeah, that was my...
Because I feel like Susan Duncan's going to do whatever Susan Duncan wants to do.
Exactly. I mean, considering that Rachel's still in a very vulnerable position physically, and she's still trapped somewhere she doesn't know, and now Susan reveals that she does know that Rachel contacted Ferdinand, so why ask her opinion about Charlotte when I feel like Susan's gonna do whatever the hell she damn well wants to?
Yeah. I feel like she's maybe testing Rachel's loyalties a little bit here.
I mean, it's so funny because when Rachel first came on the scene, and now I'm comparing her to Susan, I'm like, damn, I don't know who's colder. So I'm feeling sympathy for Rachel, and, at this point in the series.
The show has done a really good job with that because, as I've mentioned several times, like, I am not a Rachel fan. Like,
yeah.
I'm so wary of Rachel because she's done terrible, terrible things, like objectively terrible things.
Yeah.
She was calling in Ferdinand to Helsinki Clone Club, which is not okay.
No.
Not okay at all. But, you know, as you say, like, it's all relative, right? Because Susan is...
well, yeah, the apple didn't fall far from the tree, it seemed.
Yeah.
When it comes to Susan and Rachel. But, yeah, you think you can't get worse than Rachel, and you're looking at Susan, and I'm like, eh.
Because I do feel like Rachel does actually care about Charlotte.
Yes.
I don't know this 100%, but we've seen Rachel have a soft spot for Kira.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe it's also, especially since she found out that Charlotte was cloned from her. So in a sense, Charlotte is Rachel's child, which is something that Rachel has expressed desire to have. So
yeah. And that was the thing, was that I love that bit of, it was such a nuanced expression last episode when she was told, oh, we cloned Charlotte from you. And just the subtle reaction that Rachel had, I thought that was a really good shot. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why Susan's asking Rachel's opinion. I don't know if it'll matter in the long run.
Yeah, time will tell. Okay, so after all the seriousness, let's talk about Allison and Donnie and Felix.
Lifespring fertility.
Which, of course, gets started off with Trina mistakes Allison for Beth, because Allison was at the cafe with Sarah Stubbs, which makes me so happy.
And they're singing.
I love Sarah Stubbs so much. And I'm so pleased with the show for finding these little moments to bring her back.
Yes.
I love that they keep bringing Sarah Stubbs back. Always have her back, please. I love Tara Hazelton, who plays her. Like, she's so wonderful.
We should start our own musical theater.
It's so great. And they just, like, spontaneously break into song in the middle of the cafe, which I identify with this, right? Like,
yeah.
I've done this before. Not necessarily breaking out into song, but...
Why not?
I might have at some point. I can't remember. But, you know, those moments where you get really into your conversation with your friends and...
Oh, yeah.
Inadvertently cause a disturbance in public. I've done that a few times, but anyway.
It's pretty awesome when it happens.
But anyway, after Sarah Stubbs leaves, and fortunately it's after she leaves, because Trina comes up to Allison thinking that she's Beth.
Yeah.
And so she starts talking about Lifespring fertility, and bless Allison for having the presence of mind to, like, follow her out and
take a picture.
Sort of not so sneakily take a picture of her.
With my phone right here.
Like, if anybody's holding their phone like that, they're taking a picture. But it's good that she did, because she sent it to Sarah, and then, of course, Sarah was sort of not cool, but it did lead them to Lifespring fertility, and I love that...
Well, for a second I was like, why can't Donnie and Allison go in there? She's like, well, because Beth has been in there. Who else is left? Felix.
I know, like, even if Sarah isn't thinking about this, apparently... From what we saw last episode, at least Allison's thinking about it. And I love so much that Allison's, like, using her crafting ability to forge IDs now.
I know. Did you use a new laminator? Oh, yeah. And Donnie's so impressed with it.
I know. It's so great that Donnie's, so supportive.
So supportive of your illegal ID, your illegal activities, honey. And then...
Poor Donnie's, like, not catching on to the fact that he and Felix are supposed to be the couple. and Felix just gives him that sort of pitying, pitying comment.
And then Allison spying on him with the glasses. Oh, God, Donnie, stop showboating or whatever.
No, Lord and Butter, Donnie.
Lord and Butter.
But, oh, man, that whole sequence was just... I rewatched it in order to, you know, prep for this episode, and I missed half of the stuff that Donnie and Allison were saying on the phone.
Oh my God.
You know, the Air Italia situation, because I was laughing so hard the first time.
I was like howling, and when I laugh really hard, I just like start like just clapping, and my cat was on my lap, and she's like freaking out because I'm like, oh my God, this is why I love the show. So, oh God.
I have watched TV with Annie before. I can confirm that she does actually do this.
And so what was she saying? I can't remember. Sir, your seatbelt is not fastened or something like that. Well, what did she... I have to watch it again because I missed half of it because I was laughing too hard. So, yeah. But
they went to the lavatory in the airplane. Donnie and Allison did. Or whatever whatever their alter egos were. Yeah.
But Donnie's grabbing the cup at the last second. I'm like, oh, I hope he made it. So.
Apparently he did. But we got to see Donnie's underwear again.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, and there's Donnie's underwear again. Also, I appreciated that sequence of Allison confronting her friend, whose name I don't remember, but I want to say is something like Julie or Julia.
Yeah.
And... you know, she starts off acting, and then they move into the section where she's just, like, not really acting anymore.
Yeah.
In order to get this information from her, and, oh, that scene was so good.
Makes me sad.
It does. It makes you very sad, but,
yeah.
I mean, Tatiana Maslany is, as always, amazing.
Just, yeah, well, like I was saying at the point where Rachel finds out that Charlotte was cloned from her again. Example 1,000,001 of why Tatiana Maslany is so incredible. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, all of this information leads them to Brightborn. Which is apparently Brightborn Technologies. And the director of that is Evie Cho, bringing it back around.
I was going to ask you about that. She looks familiar. I got to ask Kris. So who is she again?
Evie From the first episode this season.
Okay.
We've got the Beth flashbacks. Remember?
Uh-huh.
And Beth goes to Dyad to confront Aldous Leakey, and Aldous Leakey is there talking to Evie Cho.
It wasn't, so Evie Cho, wasn't she Aldous' assistant or something?
No, because the conversation they have is Aldous says to Evie something about, or did she say to him? I don't remember. There's a conversation about one of your subjects... one of my subjects and one of your subjects is the conversation they have. So it sounded more like peers, but I feel like they're probably both Neolutionists.
So what does this have to do with the Lita clones? And now with babies?
Well, we don't know, but we do know that at least they indicated in that flashback from 401 that Evie Cho is in charge of the people who were getting the maggot bots implanted.
Wonder if the maggot bots and changing DNA is making it possible for the clones to become fertile. I don't know. Because I'm thinking Brightborn too. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
The only clone that we know of with a maggot bot is Sarah, who is already fertile.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, what is Brightborn Technologies doing in a baby clinic? So I'm just making random, totally, probably will not be true theories. So just throwing it out there.
I know. There was actually somebody who sent us a message wondering if maybe the maggot bot was actually collecting information about Sarah. So,
true.
I don't know.
But then why do Neolutionists need them? We still don't know that either.
Well, I mean, we don't know, obviously, because, again, this is part of the thing. Like, I think this was maybe before this episode had aired, though, that they sent us that message. So, before we found out that it was potentially a gene therapy delivery system.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think we don't know enough yet, is basically what I'm saying, because...
I mean, it could have dual purposes, too.
That's what I'm saying. Like, maybe it collects information from some people, and maybe it alters some people. I mean, we don't know. There's not enough info yet. So moving on to Helena, because, Donnie and Helena have this wonderful exchange early in the episode. Because Helena's in the Hendrix's basement, like, crafting, as she does. But she's moved out of Allison's craft room, apparently out of deference to Allison's need for tidiness in her craft room. But she's still making a mess, but at least she felt bad that she was making a mess.
I know. It gives me feels at how domesticated Helena's become in her own way.
Yeah. But then Donnie sort of has this sweet talk with her about explaining why Allison was sort of upset and how they needed to be careful about what they said, basically. And I got all sorts of feels about that, because Donnie's kind of like, you'll get used to it. Like, Because one, I feel kind of bad for Donnie that he's, had to adjust. But at the same time, I guess that's what you do, right? Like, if you're in a long-term relationship with somebody, you sort of adjust to their needs. So it was kind of sweet. But poor Helena, I mean, I love that whole exchange, really, because we see that Helena is very sensitive to Allison's feelings about all of this. And but it makes me sad, because she ultimately decides that she should leave to essentially spare Allison.
So was that why she decided to leave? I was like, why is she leaving? Where
I think
are you
so.
going, Helena? So, I was worried at the end.
I think that is what it is, because I don't know. It seems like Helena is very sensitive to the needs, and I think from what we've seen before, she does seem sort of concerned about the fact that she's intruding on their lives. You know what I mean? From what we've seen even just this season, that she wanted to help, but then Donnie's kind of like, stay out of the way, which isn't really what he meant, I don't think, or
no.
Not that he meant to say it that way, but I can see how it would affect Helena, where she felt kind of, I don't know, guilty.
Well, and maybe she doesn't want to bring even more craziness into their lives, since the murders that she did at Pouchy's were being investigated. And
they did mention that this episode too, yeah.
So
I can see that Helena's feeling guilty, so. Yeah.
But, again, you talk about the development of how now we really are pulling for Helena, and I personally have real strong emotions for her as part of the Sisters, and so does she towards her sisters. Such a 180 where the series began, but, so.
I mean, I think I've always loved Helena, but at the beginning, it's like you love her as this terrifying figure. Like she's a great threat. You know what I mean? I don't know, just the way they introduce her, she's such a wonderfully constructed figure of terror. But, I mean, everything they've done with her has been, I think, just wonderfully done. Like, Helena's still my favorite, I love her so much.
Well, now she's just a figure of terror on the side of her sisters. So, which is why she's leaving. But why did she bury the cryo tank? And she said, I'm sorry, I didn't know I needed to feed you nitrogen. So are the eggs dead?
Yes. Aww. Those tanks, one of my friends, I believe it was Rebecca, so thank you for this, Rebecca, actually looked up those cryo tanks. And the ones the size that Helena had, I think only lasted for, I think she said 6 to 8 weeks.
So, was just her eggs in there? Or?
That we know of, yeah.
Oh, that's really sad.
So, I did think it was very sweet, though, when she buried the tank.
And kissed it, yeah.
And then she had crafted, like, a little grave marker. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
It was all bedazzled and whatnot. It's like popsicle sticks that had been glued together and bedazzled, and it's like, oh, my heart is breaking, but it's very sweet. And she bids goodbye to family Hendrik, and then I cry.
I know, in her mountaineering gear to hit the road, and I'm like, where are you going to go? But you're pregnant with the twins, and you need prenatal vitamins.
I know, where is she gonna go?
I know. I am worried.
I am worried too, and I hope, I don't feel like it's going to go this way, but I kind of hope that she goes and finds Mrs. S or something. I doubt she will, but maybe she'll go back to the storage space that Maggie Chen had. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know, I get the feeling she's striking out totally on her own, which makes me worried. I know. But she's doing it for her sisters.
I know. I just want to give Helena a hug.
Yeah, I know.
I always want to give Helena a hug.
I know, Kris.
I guess the only random thought that I had that we haven't touched on yet was, and I don't even, like, I probably shouldn't bring this up, but I'm going to bring it up. They had the transition from Donnie at the fertility clinic.
Oh, God.
Directly to Cosima extracting the maggot bot.
Very effective. I mean, again.
It's like hilarious and horrifying at the same time.
Hilarious and so gross. Yes. This show.
Well done, show.
No, yep. This show knows how to do it. So.
That's quite the transition.
Mm-hmm.
You're laughing and cringing at the same time.
I was mostly cringing.
Yeah. This is Kris in the editing room, and I wanted to get some feedback in. I had limited time with Annie, so we didn't get through the feedback, but I wanted to include it in the episodes, especially since we're mid-season and stuff is time-sensitive. The theory I had mentioned earlier that somebody had sent us regarding extraction of DNA or gathering of information was actually sent to us by Purple Nevis, and the email reads, I have a theory that cheek implant bots are actually not changing the DNA of the hosts, but actually taking the DNA so that they can later be implanted in patients of the Brightborn Project. What are your thoughts? I have no idea. As you probably gathered earlier, there are just too many options, I feel like, at this point. Too many things that could be going on, as is the way of things on really most sci-fi shows, but especially twisty, turny ones like this one. I do like that theory, though. We got an email from Darlene saying, after watching episode 403, I think Susan Duncan shot Delphine. If you watch the scene when Susan walks to Rachel's bed at the end of the episode, the footsteps sound the same. The same shuffle noise is there when they come to a stop. I think when Delphine turns around and realizes she must be Susan, Delphine was actually asking what will happen to Rachel. I also think Delphine is still alive because Susan knows that she has been working on a cure and they need her. So thank you for sending us that theory, Darlene. As always, I guess we'll see. Leanne sent us an email with some remarks on episode 3. She says, I don't know if Helena would give up her kids, mainly because Helena was filled with hatred for Amelia and killed her for doing that. And I'm gonna nitpick slightly because I feel like what Helena was actually upset about was that Helena ended up where she did. Because I think she specifically says, you gave me to them. So I don't know that it's so much about abandoning her as leaving her with the people that she ended up with, who, I mean, they were rather abusive to her. So I get your point, but I still think that nuance is important. Leanne also says, regarding Felix's sister, I don't trust her either. I smell infiltration by Neolution. I'd ask where Cal is, but I think he's in Marine, which of course is a Game of Thrones reference. Also, I have a question about Kendall's leukemia. When they're taking her blood for DNA, does the leukemia affect the results? Can it do more harm to Cosima? Science people, if there are science people listening, please let us know. I have no answers for this. But thanks for sending that email in, Leanne. We also got an email from Nina saying, this season is really great so far. I hope that Rachel will realize now that her mother isn't on her side and that she eventually will be freed and join the other sisters against Neolution. She would be a great source for insider information. I still haven't understood what the worm is really about and why the Neolutionists would implant them voluntarily when it changes your DNA, so I hope it's nothing dangerous, but maybe every worm is different. At first I thought that the worm might have changed Sarah's DNA, and that's why she doesn't get sick and can have children. But then I thought that the worm we saw in her jaw was very small, so I think it was just implanted recently. And did they check Helena's jaw? But I guess we'll find out soon. That is a good question. It seems like since they were checking Allison, they would have checked them all, but I don't know. I wonder where Helena will go now. Maybe she's going to look for Jessie. But I hope she won't be gone for too long because the sisters need her, and she's been quite separate the whole season so far. I love the revelation that MK is Vera. I already suspected it, but now we have confirmation. I don't know if she will come back and work together with the other sisters because I don't think she can forgive Ferdinand for what he did in Helsinki. But I hope we get to see her again because I really liked her as a character and it was so great to see an equal opponent to Ferdinand, and I still don't know if we can trust him. And thank you, Nina. And we also got an email from Fred Petrie from the Netherlands, and he included some screen caps of the newspaper article that MK was showing Ferdinand, and Fred actually translated it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave that in the show notes for this episode, so you can check out the screen cap and the translation there if you're interested. And thanks for sending that in, Fred. It's pretty interesting. If you have thoughts about this episode that you'd like to share with us, you can do that in a number of ways. You can send us an email at feedback@tatianaiseveryone.com. You can record a voice memo on your smartphone and email it to us. You can call our listener voicemail line at 972-514-7223. You can leave a comment on our show notes at tatianaiseveryone.com/103. We're also on Twitter at TIE Podcast, and we're also on Facebook. Tatiana is Everyone is part of the Ask Genre TV family of podcasts. We've got podcasts for Killjoys and Lost Girl and some other things, including our new podcast Finalysis, on which we're covering Winona Earp and The 100 currently. You can find all of those at AskGenreTV.com. And in this episode, Allison's non-surreptitious photo taking was played by Tatiana Maslany. Thanks for listening.